Welcome to today's course. I'm so excited to be chatting with you guys today. Essentially, we're going to be going through the garment styles and constructions. So even though they sound the same, they're actually not, but we're going to go through those basics of those shapes, those constructions, whether it is a sweater, a cardigan, a dress, anything that you've had your eye out on. I know that we all go through Ravelry. We get so excited, or Etsy or wherever, and we're looking for a pattern to be able to make, but it's like, there are so many options, and I want you to be able to, by the end of this course, be able to tell each one and tell them apart. So let's get going, but first I'm gonna introduce myself. So first of all, hi, my name is Chantel, and I am the owner and the designer of Knititude. Knititude is 11 years old, and she is just happy as a clam. I have purple hair, I have a potty mouth, so I'm gonna try my best not to be able to, to swear during this, but essentially I design beginner-friendly, mindless, and modern patterns that are really size inclusive. So whether you are a brand new knitter and you're wanting to get into making garments for the first time, or if you're like, I have that really hard project and I need to come back to it, you can have a mindless knit with me and just have your Netflix and chill. So you can find me on Instagram at these places below. So underneath knitting, Knititude, and the main thing is that knitting a sweater should be fun. It should not be tedious. It should be something that you enjoy. And one of those ways to be able to do that is to be able to figure out those basic garment constructions and styles. So let's go. Okay, so garment styles and constructions, what is the difference? So even though they do sound similar, they're actually not. But they do come hand in hand. So essentially a construction is going to be how you physically knit or crochet that item. When it comes to style, that's the style of item that it is in the first place, like a racerback top or a sweater or a cardigan, or actually it goes a little bit more in depth, but we're gonna get to that. So there are 4 different constructions. You have the seamed, the seamless, the top down, and the bottom up. Do not worry, we're gonna go into each one of these in more detail, but essentially they are pretty self-explanatory by their names by themselves, but they essentially change how you're going to be making that piece. You also have 3 different garment styles. These are the ones that we're gonna be going to. These are the most ones that you're gonna see. They're the most popular, the most basic. There are other things like saddle shoulders or whatever, but we're mainly going to be going through the drop shoulder, the circular yoke, and the raglan. The age-old question, to seam or to not seam. This is a very hot button topic because some people love seaming. Some people do not enjoy seaming, but the main thing to know is that most beginners, if you are first making your first ever garment, getting a seamed pattern makes the most sense because you are essentially knitting things up in pieces and then you are assembling them after. So you're like, I'm going to knit a box. That is my front part of my sweater. I'm going to knit another box and it is going to be the back part of my sweater. I am going to knit a sleeve by itself and then another sleeve by itself, and then I'm going to literally seam them together. And you can use different seaming techniques. There's the mattress stitch, there is the horizontal invisible seaming technique, there is the vertical invisible seaming technique. There's so many different ways to be able to seam a sweater, but essentially it's where everything is made up in pieces and then it's assembled at the very end. Now, the advantages of a seam sweater is that seams are strong. When you think seams, you think structure because it has all of those additional enforced seams to be able to make sure that it combats against gravity. It's got a lot of hold to it. Your piece is going to hold up a lot better over time. Now, the disadvantages of a seam sweater is that you cannot try it on as you go. You essentially have to make that entire piece and then you are going to seam it at the very end. So there are advantages, there are disadvantages, and you just really got to figure out what you love. Some people love seaming because they find it very methodical, very relaxing. If that's not you, then maybe seamless is your best bet. I personally am a seamless lover. I love seamless. There's nothing more irritating to me than having to seam something at the end. I totally know that there is the advantage of it having the structure and it being strong, but the idea of literally having to do an additional step after I have knit all my pieces just absolutely makes me want to like, ooh, scream. So there's also a way to be able to do this, which is called seamless. So essentially this is where your pieces knit up all in one piece, eliminating as many seams as possible. So this can be done in a drop shoulder or any of the styles that we're going to be talking through, or a yoke. But seamless is most often seen in yokes and raglans. You'll also find it again in drop shoulders. The advantage is that there is no seaming. You don't have to worry about finishing that entire pattern and then being like, great, here's another tedious step. But the disadvantage is that because it doesn't have seams, it means that it doesn't have as much structure, which means it is not as strong of a piece. We're going to go into yokes a little bit more, but essentially if you were to put it on a hanger, it doesn't have something to keep it up and stable. It's going to naturally fall from gravity, whether you're wearing it or it is in your closet, if it's folded, whatever it is. Yeah. Advantages, disadvantages. Alongside seamed and seamless, you also have bottom up and top down. They both are pretty self-explanatory, but bottom up is when you are essentially casting on for your hem, whether that is seamed or seamless. You're casting on for your hem, and then you are working all the way up to the underarm, and you are going to then work to the neckline, either pick up those sleeves. If you are going to be doing this seamed, you essentially work up both panels from hem to the neckline, then you would seam them. You would do the same thing from the arms, whether it's top down or bottom up. If you were going to be doing a bottom up for an item that is in the round, you would essentially cast on for the hem, you would knit in the round all the way up to the underarms. Then you would then work the front panel separate, the back panel separate. You would seam them at the top. Sometimes people will use a 3-needle bind off. That is perfect. That is honestly my preference, because it is technically a seamless technique that does create a seam, since we were talking all about seams. From there, if I were to work it up, I could then pick up the arms in the round and work down, or work the bottom up and then kind of seam them in. But that's essentially how you work something bottom up. You can also work things top down, which is obviously in the reverse, where you essentially would start from the neckline and you'd work all the way down to the hem and then pick up the arms. I find that top down can be done in a drop shoulder, as well as we're going to get more into these raglans and yokes. That's usually where you see a top down coming more into play. But the advantage of a top down is, of course, you're going to knit it all the way from the top to the down and to the hem, which means that you can also try on your piece as you're going to be able to adjust length. So it's a little bit easier to be able to do, but both of them are seriously wonderful, and it really depends on what your preference is. Now that you have figured out how items are constructed, so top down, bottom up, seamed or seamless, we can now get into the styles. I kind of mentioned them a little bit earlier, but let's quickly go over them. There are 3 most common sweater styles that you see. We're going to be going through the drop shoulder, the circular yoke, and the raglan. There are other ones like called saddle shoulders, etc., but these are the main 3 that you're going to see over and over and over again. If you are looking for patterns on Ravelry or Etsy or any other place, these are probably the ones that are going to pop up the most. So let's make sure that you know how to be able to tell each one apart and then pick through. Don't worry, we have a quiz at the very end. The first one that we're going to be going through is the drop shoulder, and it is the probably most obvious one because essentially it goes over the shoulder and drops to be able to create that seam. Not always up here, though drop shoulders can, but essentially it does have that vibe that it kind of has that oversized look. Usually you'll find this in like a boxy boyfriend sweater. Usually the ease determines where that sleeve is going to land. I've got a few drop shoulder options here, but the main thing is that you're looking for, sorry, I'll make sure that that is coming up right here, is that the drop, it literally drops down. So I can hold this seam out, and then all of a sudden when I drop it, it literally drops down here. Again, that ease is going to determine how low that seam kind of happens. But a drop shoulder is pretty easy to see because again, we're looking for those like vertical seams. You can also do different types of drop shoulders. So you might have a modified drop shoulder, and that's essentially where the designer is going to cast off stitches in the underarm for a better fit. So my first one, which is a seamed one, does not have any cast off stitches underneath, but I do in my other design, it does have those stitches bound off underneath. That creates a better fit essentially, and gets rid of some of that bulk. Now you're also going to find, Some drop shoulders are going to have an inset sleeve. So essentially what that means, if we're looking at this, we can see that there is a slight curve from, we're going to put this over here, that curves up and starts to essentially taper. It's right here. And it starts to eliminate some of that fabric. And this is really, really helpful, especially for plus sizes, to be able to get rid of that additional bulk that can sometimes happen with grading. Drop shoulders, I find the biggest issue that I run into them is that when we are designing, so me as a designer, I want to make sure that my drop shoulders land on my shoulders on all sizes. But I find that this is the easiest time where things start to go wrong. And all of a sudden, if it's supposed to land here on me, and we don't eliminate that additional fabric for plus sizes, then all of a sudden it's like coming down to like here, which is not the same look. So what you'll usually find is that you're in a drop shoulder, you're going to find that it's either modified. So again, you have those stitches in the underarm that are bound off for a better fit, as well as you're gonna find some of that tapering from an inset sleeve that essentially just alters the fabric from the underarm from the underarm up to the shoulder, because for most of us, our shoulders are the same. When you come to an extra small to a 5X, there's actually only 3 inches of difference in width or shoulder span. So we really do like to play with those inset sleeves as well as a modified drop shoulder. So the disadvantages of a drop shoulder is that if it's not graded correctly, you can essentially give too much bulky fabric in the underarms or the shoulders, or the seams come to your elbows. But the advantages of a drop shoulder is that it just has that really beautiful roomy vibe that everyone loves. It's so classic. It has such a structured shape to it. Again, usually you end up having that seam at the top, whether that is picked up if you're working top down or bottom up. Or you have the seam from a 3-needle bind off, or it's seamed just in general at that shoulder. It usually means that it has a lot more structure when it comes to the integrity of the sweater. So we love a drop shoulder. Again, disadvantages, advantages, just as we were talking about all the constructions, but the drop shoulder really, you can't lose. We love a yoke. That yoke ain't no joke. Essentially, a yoke sweater is where it is completely seamless. It doesn't have any seams on the shoulder itself. And the way to think of a yoke is that a yoke in knitting or crochet terms is essentially the fabric that happens from the neck to the underarm. When you're actually knitting a yoke, usually what will happen is that if you're working top down, you're going to cast on for the neckline. You're going to knit all of the fabric, so it kind of looks like a cape all the way over, including your arms. From there, you'll usually take the arm stitches, put them on hold, and then work the body by itself. A yoke is absolutely wonderful because of multiple things. Yokes essentially have decreases that are happening. This one happens with all these yarn overs here. Wow, sorry, it's hard to go backwards. All of these dots that you're seeing here, those holes, those are actually yarn overs, which are increases, which means that essentially when you're doing a yoke, you end up having a lot of increases in one row. You'll see all of these increases happening here. And then you have a bunch of space to play. Those are usually just knit stitches. And then you do another whole row of lots of increases. And then you have more space to be able to knit and hang out. And then you do another round of a lot of increases in the same row. So this usually ends up leaning towards color work or lace work, because you can really play with what is happening in between those increases and really have some fun with them. Whenever I think of a yoke, and I'm just I know that this is not why it's called a yoke, but I always imagine an egg. You have if you crack it and you put it into a skillet, you have the yellow yolk, which is your neck hole, and then that fluffy around is the additional fabric. So even though I know that it's not because of a yolk of an egg why it's called a yoke, that's what it always makes me think of. I think that I am inserting my head into the yolk, the yellow yolk, and then I'm having that fluffy goodness that essentially comes all the way down to my underarms. A yoke can be knit top down, or bottom up. Again, top down is nice because you get to cast on for that neckline. You work a big amount of increases, then you work just in regular, then a bunch more increases, and then you work just normal, and then a bunch more increases, and then just normal. And then again, you're going to put your stitches on hold for your sleeves and then just essentially knit the rest down. I love a top down yoke because one, a yoke is wonderful because it's a little free and it doesn't have those seams. It's a lot more maneuverability is the easiest way to put it, as well as you can try it on as you go. Then you would pick up those sleeves in the round and then knit down. The advantage of a yoke is that it is completely seamless. When you're picking up those stitches, you essentially put those stitches on hold as they are live, so you pick them up as if they are live and just go down. There's no picking up stitches in like a drop shoulder or any other way. It's just easy peasy, a lemon squeezy. Again, the disadvantages of a yoke, sorry, we didn't talk about bottom up. You can also knit a yoke bottom up where essentially you cast on for the hem, work all the way up, you work the arms separately, and then you start to join them all, then work those decreases into the neckline, and your yoke is done. Again, the advantages of a yoke is that it is seamless, which means that you can do a lot of color work in there. It's a lot of fun to be able to kind of play around. The disadvantages of it is that it is seamless, which means that it doesn't have as much structure to be able to play with. But again, a yoke is just like fun. It's engaging. It's fun to be able to do. If you haven't done a yoke yet, please try my Easy Ellie yoke. We love it. And last but not least, the beautiful raglan. The raglan is most known for having these really beautiful, distinct lines that go all the way down. And these are actually made by the increases when you're making it. Raglans are awesome because essentially they've got a lot of like maneuverability. Usually you'll see a raglan, when you think of like an old school baseball t-shirt, it has those distinct lines in it, and that's because it does give a lot more room. It doesn't have a shoulder seam, which means that you're able to move a lot easier. So much like the yoke, it's pretty similar that it doesn't have those shoulder seams. It can be completely seamless, and you can have a little bit more of that movability. Raglans are essentially worked, that line are worked in quadrants. So you essentially would cast on for all of your neckline, but then each one is broken up into 4 different parts: a front, a arm, a back, and another arm. And on each quadrant, you are usually doing an increase and an increase, an increase and an increase, an increase and an increase on the back, and then an increase and an increase on the shoulder. So essentially you're working 8 increases at the same time. Usually with a raglan, you are going to be working those increases every 2 rows, 2 to 4 rows, unless you start doing a compound raglan. And essentially a compound raglan is when you have different ratios of when you are actually starting to create those increases. So sometimes you will see raglans that are very strict and regimented, and then you may see some that have like changes where all of a sudden it's like you are increasing, and then you're increasing not as often, and you're kind of playing with that ratio. So raglans can be kind of done in regular raglan, which is like every increase every second row. Otherwise you can have a compound raglan. So essentially a raglan can be worked top down or bottom up. Again, it is completely seamless. When you are working it top down, it is similar to a yoke. You'll be casting on for that neckline. You'll be working the entire yoke portion while working those increases every second row, unlike the yoke where you're doing a bunch of increases, then a bunch of just plain knit rows, a bunch of increases, and a bunch of knit rows. Again, the raglan is increasing steadily over the entire yoke. From there, you would you wouldn't cast off, but you would put your sleeve stitches on hold and then essentially work the bottom down. You'll pick up those live stitches from the sleeves and then work the sleeves down, which again means that you don't have to worry about any seams, which we know that it does have a disadvantage because seams are sturdy and strong. You can also work a raglan bottom up 2, where essentially you would cast on the hem, you would work it in the round all the way up, again like a yoke. You would work your sleeves separately from cuff up, then you would essentially join all of those live stitches, decreasing your yoke portion until you end up getting to your neckline. So you can essentially do a raglan both with like a regular raglan or a modified raglan. You can also do them top up and bottom up or top down. I am trying to say too many words, so thank you for keeping up with me. And yeah, the disadvantages are, of course, that it is seamless because it doesn't have as much structure, but the advantage of it being seamless is that you also don't have to seam at the end. Okay, so now that we have gone through that, let's just do a quick recap. So we have constructions, which are seamed, which means that each panel is knit separately and then seamed together. You have seamless, which means that there are no seams and is worked in a fashion where you essentially don't have to seam anything at the end. You have bottom up, starting at the hem and working all the way into the neck, or you have top down, which is started at the neckline and then worked all the way down to the hem. For our styles, we have a drop shoulder, which comes in a regular, a modified, and an inset. So regular is just a good old drop shoulder. Modified is when we end up we bind off some of those stitches in the underarm. An inset means that we are tapering and we're actually making edits to be able to get rid of that bulk. We have a circular yoke, which is seamless and great for color work and for lace. And then we also have raglans, which are always seamless, but have those telltale baseball lines. Now that we have gone through all of these things, I'm gonna quiz you. So first off, what construction and style do you think that this pattern is? I'm gonna give you a little bit of time. I feel like I should sing the da-na-na-na-na-na Jeopardy song. Okay, got it? Have you figured it out? Let's go. This is a top-down yoke. This one is called my Easy Eyelet yoke. It's a perfect yoke sweater pattern if you've never tried a top-down yoke. And the one thing that we're looking for is that we're looking for no diagonal lines to show that it's a raglan. There are no lines on the shoulder or off the shoulder, which would be a drop shoulder. Essentially, we can tell that it's completely seamless. It doesn't have anything. You also can see those increases that are happening with a bunch of space in between them, which would be, again, really good for any kind of color work or for lace. It is a top-down yoke. And again, this is my Easy Eyelet yoke pattern. It's perfect if you are wanting to try your first sweater ever, or if you just want a mindless knit. Okay, let's go to the next one. What construction and what style do you think this pattern is? It's cheating because I know. Okay, have you got your answer? This one is a top-down drop shoulder. It could be seen as a bottom-up, but don't worry, this one is top-down. Essentially what we're looking for is we're seeing that shoulder seam on the very top, and we're seeing it drop off of the shoulder by itself. We can see that line at the bottom arrow that this is a seam that's going down. This one is my Sweet V sweater, so it's actually a modified drop shoulder and it has an inset sleeve. So in other words, it's got those additional stitches cast off in the underarm and then it's tapered all the way off. All the way off, all the way from the underarm to the shoulder. Okay, this one is your last one. What construction and style do you think my Syngonium sweater is? I should really put some music. Okay, let's go. This one is a top-down raglan. So you can see those baseball lines, those diagonal lines, and there's no lines on top of the shoulder, which means that it doesn't have a shoulder seam, but it does have that raglan increase line. So the Syngonium is also awesome because you can essentially try it on as you go because it is not knit top down, and then you can try it on to the right length. Also, the lace is beginner friendly. So if that is up your alley, you should go for it. That's it, our time is up. I hope you enjoyed learning about garment constructions and styles. You can find all of this information actually in my new book. It's called Sweater Success from Cast On to Closet, learn how to fearlessly knit cardigans and pullovers. It officially drops November 4th, but you can still get it for pre-order right now. I hope you enjoyed. Again, being able to figure out what your basic garment constructions and styles is really, really helpful when you're looking out for your next pattern. If you want to, come say hi to me on social media underneath Knititude, and come pop in, say hello, tell me what you've learned. I hope you enjoyed this entire course. We'll see you later.